Okay, so I don't know how much you've been paying attention to Kevin Lee because I feel like this is a story that's kind of being like swept under the rug a little bit within the MMA community because Kevin Lee just fought in a regional scene. He's been trying to get back onto the Contender Series. He's just has the goal in general to want to get back to the UFC and to still to this day win a championship. Fight Islam Makhachev. He still has big hopes and aspirations. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Kevin Lee today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you were to hear, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with many YouTube channels. I don't know if you can hear my deep breathing right now. Apologies. Still dealing with a stuffy nose. We're almost out of summer over here, guys. Anyways, I want to talk about Kevin Lee. So, of course, he just got his first win over on the regional scene. He's no longer fighting in like things like Eagle FC. He's not fighting in any big name MMA organizations. Not to say like Eagle FC was a big MMA organization. I'm just saying like Kevin Lee has kind of dropped off the face of the earth a little bit, and only like MMA fans that kind of like ridiculously pay attention to the sport are kind of keeping up with Kevin Lee right now. So it came out that he tried to get on the Contender Series and the UFC wasn't interested. Whoever it was, I mean, apparently Dana White has no clue who comes onto the Contender Series, but to be honest with you, I don't know how much I necessarily believe that, but regardless, whoever was at the UFC, whoever's controlling who gets onto the Contender Series was not interested in Kevin Lee. I always found that a little bit weird because whenever Kevin Lee was just trying to get back into the UFC, first off, he ended up getting cut. I kind of get why, but at the same time, it was proven to me and to a lot of people that Kevin Lee did belong with the top guys. He wasn't necessarily a champion caliber fighter, but he absolutely, like, every single fight that he was in, as opposed to, like, with the exception of when he was just exiting the UFC, he gave these guys such huge problems. For example, everybody points back to his Tony Ferguson fight, but it's not just like the fights against Charles Oliveira. Like, Kevin Lee is a fantastic fighter. He has all the technique in the world. The only issue with Kevin Lee was he had a little bit of a heart issue, and I know that's kind of a big issue to have, but I wouldn't even say like it's a big heart issue. It's just his heart's not nearly in the game to win a war with a guy like Tony Ferguson, for example, right? I always found it very strange that he was never let back into the UFC, or at least never given another shot, because he wanted to get back into the UFC. He still is showing that he will do anything to get back into the UFC, to the point where he's going to fight on the Contender Series. And I think that's a really, really humble thing for Kevin Lee to do, and it shouldn't be, but it is actually a little bit embarrassing for Kevin Lee to want to get onto the Contender Series just to show that he can belong into the UFC. He's a world-class MMA fighter, somebody who almost made it to the top level of the UFC, or was in the top level of the UFC, and now he's fighting on regional promotions. Now he is struggling to get a fight with any significant MMA organization. He said that he's willing, and he's very, very open about this too. Wants to go in the Contender Series to prove that he belongs into the UFC. I think that's an awesome thing to do, and for Kevin Lee to really do that, like, he's gonna face so much backlash from the fans where it's like, oh my god, Kevin Lee, he is so washed. Kevin Lee, oh, look at Kevin Lee on the Contender Series. Like, all of these guys doing absolutely nothing with their lives, right? Just criticizing Kevin Lee for wanting to still accomplish his hopes and dreams getting back into the UFC, willing to go through that embarrassment to go on the Contender Series. And I'm not saying that it is an embarrassing thing to do. It shouldn't be an embarrassing thing to do, but the MMA fans will look down on Kevin Lee for that. And he risks losing his legacy forever if he loses to some dude on the Contender Series, because there are a lot of really, really great, talented guys that go onto the Contender Series. You have guys coming over that are champions from LFA. You have guys coming over from the East that are just unheard of and world-class fighters. Like, how many champions have been produced, or top-level contenders have been produced for the Contender Series? Like, Kevin Lee wants to take a huge risk in order to get to the UFC. He wants to go in there. He wants to make a statement and be let back into the promotion. I'm shocked that they said no to that. I'm shocked that they didn't want him back in the UFC, and I'm shocked that at the very least, they're not letting him back on the Contender Series. And I get that they want to, like, have the younger guys fight, but I mean, it's Kevin Lee. Is he even that old? I'm going to look it up for really quick. Kevin Lee is only 32 years old. What about guys like Cesar Almeida? I understand that they don't usually sign older guys to the Contender Series or even have older guys fight down there in general. But for Kevin Lee, somebody who is already a name, somebody who is insanely promotable, always brings fun fights no matter where he goes. Not only fun fights, he promotes the fights. He does everything possible to get eyes on him. This is a guy that you want in the UFC. The only reason, and this is why I'm thinking this, is because all the stars kind of align. Like, I look at Kevin Lee and I go, he'd be great for the UFC, especially with the UFC kind of lacking so much stardom right now, lacking the drama. The only thing that I'm left to believe here is that he was very, very difficult to deal with, or the UFC, or he like had a bad relationship with somebody in the UFC, because it doesn't make sense to me why the UFC wouldn't want him. Even to have fighters like build your name off Kevin Lee. Even if you don't want Kevin Lee to even fight the top guys, to have him here doing what he does is very good for the company, in my opinion. And again, his skill set is top tier. His skill set belongs with the top fighters in the lightweight division. If he wants to fight at welterweight, his skill set belongs at the top of the welterweight division. He just didn't always get the job done. How many fighters do you have that are on losing streaks? How many fighters that you have in the UFC that are completely inconsistent? I don't understand why Kevin Lee, of all people, they don't want back in the UFC. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? I feel like I'm the only one sitting here and going, why won't we let Kevin Lee fight? Or I know, I understand it's not we, as if it's my decision. Obviously not. I look at Kevin Lee as a guy who still wants to accomplish his dreams. That fire has not been lit out again. He still wants to fight Islam Makhachev, and I don't look at that and I kind of go, oh yeah, okay, Kevin Lee's going to fight Islam Makhachev. I don't think that's ever going to happen, and I think Islam Makhachev would absolutely defeat Kevin Lee, but I like the fact that he believes in himself so much that he's willing to go through the Contender Series of all things and risk his legacy on that. You can come back and say he didn't really have a legacy, but you guys got to understand what I'm talking about over here. All of his self-worth as a fighter, he's sacrificing going through the Contender Series in order to get a shot at this. I think that's an admirable thing to do, and we already have the proof that he is a fun fighter. His skill set belongs with the top of the division. He is a fun fighter in general when it comes to trash talking, press conference, getting eyeballs, getting the crowd cheering for him. I think this is a great opportunity that the UFC is missing out on, and even if the UFC doesn't want him, I don't understand why some big giant promotion isn't signing him. It doesn't make sense. The only thing that I can think about is, again, Kevin Lee must be very, very difficult to deal with. That's the only thing I can think of. If anybody has any outside information, I would love to hear it in the comment section down below. But regardless, the conversation about Kevin Lee doesn't have to stop yet, because, of course, we did know that he did retire, and now he's out of retirement. But I did have some thoughts on Kevin Lee actually leaving the sport. If you'd like to check it out on this video right here, guys, I would love to have you over there. Thank you for watching. Take care.